everyone, and thank you for checking out another one of our videos. I'll be talking about something today that's a little bit different than what we've covered so far, but something that is used very, very frequently, and that's punishment. Punishment is very applicable to our discussion of behavior management because it is so often used as a consequence, and it's most often used in order to help decrease the occurrence of a certain behavior that you don't want your child to be doing. But when thinking about using behavior or using punishment, in relation to long-term behavior change, there are several things that we need to keep in mind. So there are many ways in which punishment can be actually really ineffective in changing behaviors. So what I'll do in this video is kind of explain how we most often see punishment being used, also what we see as the outcomes of punishment, in addition to what some of the negative side effects are to punishment. And then I'll also talk about how could we use punishment most effectively if we do think that we need to use it. So first, to start off, there are three main types of punishment. The first one is if you give something negative to your child after they did something that you don't want them to do. So, for example, you might scold them, you might yell, or you might even use something physical like spanking. And then the second type of punishment is if you take something away after your child did something. So, for example, that might be a privilege like screen time or their phone, or a privilege like going out with their friends. And then the third type of punishment is if you require your child to do something as a penalty after they did something. So, for example, a common one that we see in schools is requiring that a child write an essay or something like that after they got in trouble. Or in the home, you might assign them extra chores to do after they did something they weren't supposed to. Now, all three of these types of punishments most often lead to three outcomes, more or less. So first, when we give a punishment, it is likely to stop the behavior in its tracks. So in that moment, we do see the child usually stop what they're doing. And that's often because there's a certain shock value that comes along with punishment. The child wasn't expecting to be yelled at. So they kind of stop what they're doing, and they might be a little frozen in that moment. And while that outcome might seem really promising to you in the moment, it's usually only that, just that one moment. And research has shown time and time again that the effects of punishment typically don't go past that initial moment of stopping the behavior. You will see that behavior again, even if you punish it over and over again. So the third outcome of punishment is that it really doesn't depend on the severity of the punishment. So taking away electronics for longer and longer every time your child does the behavior will likely do very little to change your child's behavior in the long term. What it might do, if you increase your punishment, that might increase how upset your child is in that moment. But again, for the long-lasting behavior change, we do need to help our kids develop the behaviors that we want to see, and punishment doesn't really do that. It just kind of shows them what they shouldn't do, but it doesn't help them understand what they should do, and doesn't give them the space to practice what they should do. So, for example, to help your child develop a habit of cleaning up after herself, yelling at her to clean up her room or taking away privileges will really not make her more likely to develop a habit of cleanliness. The more effective strategy would be to identify times when she does clean up after herself, and then really praise those and show her what it is that you are looking for. So aside from these outcomes, there are also some negative side effects that come with punishment that we don't even intend to make happen with our use of punishment, but they do come up in kids when we use punishment. So first, your child may react with really strong emotions to receiving a punishment. Like they may exhibit crying, they may be angry and slam doors, they may talk back at you, or in younger kids, they may even hit or kick back at you. And you might feel that your child should feel upset after some action that they took. But again, remember that this feeling of upsetness will not change their behavior next time. So they're just feeling upset in that moment, but they're not actually learning a lesson. And then the second common negative side effect of punishment is avoidance or distancing themselves from parents. And we see this both physically and psychologically. or if you use certain activities like extra chores as punishment, your child may begin avoiding those activities because they've built this negative association to that activity. And then a third common negative side effect of punishment is that it increases the likelihood that your child is going to act aggressively. And this is especially true if they receive physical punishments like spanking, or even if you try to physically force their body to do something. For example, if they're not going to time out and you physically try to pick them up and put them in a chair, that is also likely to increase negative and aggressive behaviors in them. And then lastly, the fourth negative side effect is modeling or copying. So often we see kids repeat the patterns that they see from their parents, and then they use those patterns with their peers when conflicts come up there. So they may hit their peers, they may yell at their peers, and model what they've seen when they themselves get in trouble. So looking at all these negative side effects, punishment really has more cons than it does pros. It's likely that we won't see long-term positive changes in behavior, and it's likely that we will see negative side effects that weren't even intended by the parent who used punishment. So to make sure that we avoid that, let me cover some steps to use punishment effectively. Like always, when we have steps in our videos, the first step is to select the behavior you want to decrease. And then second, you have to pick what you would like to see instead of that behavior. And we call that a replacement behavior. So for example, maybe you want your child to stop hitting his brother when they disagree. So just ask yourself, what would I like him to do instead? Maybe I want him to come talk to me. Or maybe I want him to take a break and calm himself down somewhere away from his brother. Just pick one behavior that you would like to see as your replacement behavior. And then after you have that behavior, the third step is to decide how you will reward it with either praise, attention, or a point system. Those are all good options. It just needs to be consistent. So anytime you see that replacement behavior, use your reward. And the more often you can use them, the quicker you'll see behavior change. And then the fourth step is to decide on a punishment to use. It could be time out, it could be loss of a privilege, it could be loss of points if you're using a point system. The most important part is just that you keep the punishment mild and short. You're keeping it mild and short because anything more severe will not help, and it'll just bring out those negative side effects. So use 2 minutes of timeout instead of 10. Or give an evening without screen time instead of taking away screen time for a whole week. And then it's also important that you pick your punishment ahead of time. So do these steps ahead of time when you're calm, so that when you're in the moment and you're frustrated, you don't just pick something really severe and ineffective. And then lastly, make sure that the rewards you give for the replacement behaviors outweigh the punishment. So give more praise than reprimands, give more positive points than negative points, and so on. So as you can see with these steps that I just covered, there is a place for punishment in effective behavior management, but it's only a small component that really needs to be outweighed by things like praise or other reinforcements. That way we can really see results in the long term. So try to identify a behavior in your child that you often find yourself punishing, either by taking things away or reprimanding or yelling. And when you identify that behavior, try to use the steps that I just covered to pick a really mild and brief punishment, and also to pick that replacement behavior that you can praise effusively or give extra points for, or give attention for every single time it happens. So that is all we had on punishments this week. As always, leave any questions you may have in the comments and let us know if there are any specific behaviors that you're working on. And if you want to learn more or are interested in receiving additional support with these strategies or any of the strategies we've covered in our videos, you can always learn more about our practice and the supports we provide at galvingrowthgroup.com. Thank you.